Good. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Spokane City Council Housing Forum this evening. We're so excited that our speakers could join us and that the public can join us even as we get ready to gather for a holiday later this week. And I just wanted to make it clear tonight, we're tackling the issues of housing supply and affordability within the city limits of Spokane. That's the focus of this forum. In the past, we've done a forum on sheltering the homeless, which is a very important issue. We've also had 4 forums on landlord-tenant relations, which is also very important. And we've also had several task forces on housing quality. And those are all important, and that work continues for the city. But this evening, we're really focusing on supply and affordability with a little bit of an emphasis on what might be possible with 3 new bills that City Council had quite a bit to do with in passing the legislature over the last few years. One was a bill called 1406, which gives us a rebate of 1/100th of a sales tax, a percent of a sales tax. It doesn't raise our taxes, it just gives us some money every year for affordable housing. Then there was 2497, which City Council wrote and got Representative Tim Ormsby to sponsor, and that passed this last year. And that allows 50% of revenues from tax increment financing districts like the West Quadrant TIF to go into affordable housing. And then City Council also had a hand in 1590, which allows cities or counties to raise sales tax by 0.1% and dedicate that to affordable housing. And so those are some of the underlying things that bring us here. The mayor's office is also doing housing action plan. And so we thought we would bring together some private sector people from the realtors and the home builders, some nonprofits, and city staff, and just folks like that that can talk about what things are actually happening right now. What are plans that are underway? What are possibilities? And then later in the evening, we're going to open it up for any members of the public to give us their response to what they heard tonight or any other housing-related issues that they want to talk about. There is a sign-up sheet right now that's live. It will be live for about an hour. If you want to sign up, we don't have unlimited spots, and you could prepare to speak for about 2 minutes if you would like to do that. So I'm about to turn it over to our moderator for the evening, and then you'll hear back from me near the end of the presentations, and then I'll take over for the public comment. But it is my great pleasure right now to introduce our moderator, Rowena Pineda. She currently works at the United Way and is the Director of Community Collaborations and Equity, and she's been very active in our community on all sorts of issues that impact people, both rich and poor, and recently made a housing choice of her own to move into the downtown core. And so I thought she would be the perfect person to share with us and keep the conversation going. So Rowena, I'll turn it over to you. Thanks for being here.
Great. Thank you, Council President Beggs. Good evening, everyone. It's good to see you all. I think tonight, as the Council President said, we have an array of speakers that will be providing us with a flavor for what housing supply looks like for our city. And just some housekeeping for us tonight. Just want to remind everyone that some of our presenters will have to leave early, so because of other commitments that they have, so they may not be here for the whole time. And also that we will be keeping time. I think everyone has an agenda of how much time they have. And I'm usually very gentle about cutting people off, but I do have Hannalee at my side, and she has the power of mute. So, and we are not afraid to use it if we have to. But we will be nice and give people, a warning if you're going a little over. So with that, I want to start by introducing Cupid Alexander. And Cupid is a recent hire to the City of Spokane as the Division Director for Neighborhood Housing and Human Services. He's been with us 1 week, but has already hit the ground running. And so welcome, Cupid. It's good to have you in Spokane. And please share
Yeah,
with
thank
us
you.
what you have planned for your role with the city.
Yeah, thank you for that. I'm humbled to be here and to listen in on this conversation, identifying the needs for the community. I know this is the first time that many of you are meeting me, so I figured I'd give you a snapshot of my background really quickly. Sorry for the glare on my glasses. I spent about 12 years at a housing authority, so I worked in Beaverton, Oregon, worked for the Washington County Department of Housing Services. I was a case manager. I worked with our continuum of care dollars, CDBG, and I worked with our program administration. So after that, I spent about 3 years at a redevelopment authority working with our TIF dollars called the Portland Housing Bureau. There, I was a program implementation coordinator, and then I was also a senior policy analyst, which led to help. I helped develop out a $258 million bond, and then an associated regional $658 million bond. And then I also helped create a tool called the preference policy, and I worked with our implementation of our inclusionary housing program, and then there was some other policy work that I did there. The last 4 years, I've spent them working for the Portland mayor, his name is Ted Wheeler, 2 of which were spent as a senior policy advisor with housing and economic development, and then the last most recent 2 prior to 2 Thursdays ago. I've been here for about 7 days, but I already feel like a family member here. I spent the last 2 years as the Director of Strategic Initiatives, which involved workforce development and innovation, large-scale infrastructure development, housing, economic development, and community engagement and constituent services. So, my view of housing is much like politics. Many solutions are localized. And though I'm from the Northwest region and have been a resident in both in Alaska and in Oregon my whole life, I know that many solutions are generated from conversations like this, because I truly believe those who are closest to the problem are usually closest to the solution. So I will always look for opportunities to utilize our dollars with the direction and guidance from the mayor and city council on ways to create a spectrum of housing solutions that serve the needs of the community, help contribute to anti-displacement and anti-gentrification efforts, and create high-opportunity neighborhoods, both now and for future residents. And I look forward to doing this work with you all. And be sure to reach out to me. I feel like if I'm going to drown, I might as well drown while people are giving me grace. So now is the time to reach me. I'll be sure to do my best to hear your concerns and work towards a collective solution. If you see me here, I'm just listening because there are so many people who have been doing this work for a long time, and I don't feel like I can just come in and start offering solutions. Everyone will be like, he just got here, what does he know? So I'm hoping to continue to learn from you all and to work with you all and to utilize the tools that we have towards the future of an inclusive and helpful Spokane. So with that, I'll turn it back over to the moderator, and thank you for this time.
Great. Thank you, Cupid, and thanks again for being with us. And we won't let you drown. We're usually very helpful, and so I'm looking forward to working with you in the future. Our next speaker is Maren Murphy. Welcome, Maren. Maren is a planner with Neighborhood and Planning Services with the city, and she will walk us through an update to the city's housing plan. Maren?
While we're looking for Maren, I just wanted to note, I meant to say that at the top, that we have all the city council members who are on this this evening. Not all of them can stay the entire time, but I just want to appreciate all of them. We've all been working on housing issues together for many years now, and they're going to be interested, and they'll have an opportunity to ask the remaining panelists who are there at the end of the formal presentation questions and make comments and observations that they have. So thank you, City Council members, for being here.
Do you want us to go to Isaiah?
Hi, sorry. I went to turn on my video and I don't know, something kicked me off. I apologize. I am ready. I don't think I can turn on my video though, so. I am up, right?
Yep.
Yes.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, sorry. Okay, so thank you, Council President Beggs and council members for having me here tonight. My name is Maren Murphy, and I work in planning services for the city. I'm looking forward to hearing the discussion tonight. And as the council president shared at the beginning, we are at the city are working to help increase housing options that are affordable and accessible for people and families of all incomes. And to support that, the city is working on a housing action plan as one way to help align priorities to address housing needs in our city. And to kick off, I just want to play a brief overview video of the project, and then I want to share some more current updates as we are done. So I think we have that video queued up.
Housing is a foundation to support the health and well-being of Spokane's residents, yet housing affordability is an urgent challenge in Spokane and in cities across the state. From 2012 to 2018, the median household income in Spokane has increased 32%, the median monthly rent has increased 11%, and the median home sales prices for the city has increased 47%. In 2019, the Washington legislature took action to address the affordable housing crisis, encouraging cities to build more homes of all shapes, sizes, and prices. Earlier in 2020, the City of Spokane received a grant from the Washington Department of Commerce to develop a housing action plan. So what does a housing action plan do? The Housing Action Plan identifies changes to be made through policies and regulations to achieve our community's housing needs and objectives. The process is informed by a housing needs assessment that helps answer questions about our housing needs, as well as through community engagement. This is an opportunity to focus attention, build community support, and promote accountability to enact change. The goal of the Housing Action Plan is to encourage the construction of additional affordable and market-rate housing that promotes greater housing diversity, affordability, and access to opportunity for residents of all incomes, including extremely low-income households and cost-burdened households. In doing this, the Housing Action Plan is encouraged to prioritize the creation of affordable, inclusive neighborhoods for all by looking for ways to overcome barriers and minimize displacement. The project approach is data-driven, where data and evidence will build a common and accurate understanding of housing needs, community-informed, where we'll collaborate with the community to understand preferences, barriers, gaps, and solutions, and a focus on equity, where Inequity in Housing recognizes and works to overcome the history of housing discrimination in Spokane and aims to ensure all people have housing choices that are diverse, high quality, affordable within their income, and with access to opportunities, services, and amenities. Community engagement is an important part of the process to understand the diversity of experiences, perspectives, and priorities related to housing. This includes hearing from community members, nonprofit housing advocates, local builders and developers, realtors, public agencies, community organizations, faith-based groups, and of course hearing from people like you. The timeline for completion is spring 2021. We look forward to connecting with you throughout this process and invite you to learn more at the project page, include signing up for an email list to get updates, reviewing project materials, and learning more about upcoming engagement opportunities. Thank you for being a part of shaping the future of housing in our city.
All right, well, thank you. So I just wanted to acknowledge that as we're talking about housing needs, we know that many people in our community are experiencing housing challenges. So we know there's an urgency to this conversation and a priority to address changes in both the short term and the long term. So following the video, I I'm hoping that we can pull up the Housing Action Plan project page. I just wanted to draw attention to a few current things that we're working on and encourage you all to participate in the conversation. So right at the top of the page, you'll see that we are looking for input on your housing experience. We have a brief online community survey that we hope everyone takes. It's an opportunity to share and participate in the housing discussion, whether you rent or own a home, have lived here for a while, or just moved here. We want to hear about issues and barriers to finding housing, as well as preferences and values that you look for in housing. So you see that we have a survey for people who live in Spokane. We also have a survey for those who work in Spokane and live outside the city. And then we have a survey for housing industry professionals to help share feedback on housing supply and development. And the surveys are one piece to help us gather information as we build the conversation forward. Scrolling down to materials and presentations on the project page, if we can, you'll see that we have a housing needs assessment. And this helps pull data points about housing needs and gaps in the Spokane community. There are many ways to look at housing data, and this helps us gather an initial insight into what our needs and gaps are. Finally, we're keeping the project page updated with materials from meetings, including our Housing Action Plan working group with community stakeholders, as well as updates that we've shared with the city's boards, commissions, and city council. The video that we did play, it was a little hard for me to hear. I'm not sure if it was for others, but it is on the website there. So if somebody wants to go back and check that information out, it's all there. And again, we just invite you to check out the project page. Again, that's my.spokanecity.org/housing. We'll take you there. Please complete our survey. We'd love to hear about your housing experience. And then stay tuned for more opportunities related to the Housing Action Plan as we begin to talk about strategies and actions that will help address housing affordability in our city. So that's all. I just wanted to provide a really brief overview. Sorry about the technical glitch at the beginning, but thank you all for having me tonight. And I really look forward to hearing the conversation. So.
Thank you, Maren, for that. I just want to commend Maren for all the work that she has done to get this project going. I've been in at least one or two of those meetings that she has convened, and she's very organized, and just getting this far in this project is impressive. So thank you for all the work that you've done. Also, just encourage everyone to do the survey. And I know that Maren has reached out to other communities to see if we can translate that survey so that we can get as much feedback as possible. So our next speaker is Isaiah Payne. Isaiah is with the Spokane Home Builders Association and will provide insight on home development in the city. Isaiah, welcome.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Appreciate this opportunity. Thanks everyone who's tuning into this. So I want to kick off our conversation by sharing a couple of charts with you. We think that we're in a concerning place as far as housing inventory in our region generally, but also in the city of Spokane. And so I want to share one chart. It's really just a home price breakdown based on median income in the city of Spokane. The other based on what our current median new home construction price is. So this is based on new home construction. So really our ideal, this industry standard model, is using median household income of just under $52,000. And if that individual were to use 30% of their income for housing with a 5% down payment, a 5% interest rate on a 30-year loan, that's how we yield these numbers. And so really the ideal percentage breakdown drives what you see here. So a land cost, we want to see that around $20,000. That would mean a land cost of $50,000. Those direct costs are things like construction labor, the cost of goods. Those are really not very flexible. We want to see that about 50% as well. Those indirect costs are going to be things like marketing, the administration, some of that overhead for the construction company. And then you're going to see that net profit. The target is 6%. Now, compared to some other industries, you look at like restaurants, for example, their net profit is targeted at like 8 to 10%. So it's really not an exorbitant profit margin. And keep in mind too, when we see increases in the cost of lumber, for example, most of these contracts are fixed. And so, when lumber increases by $14,000 on a project, that's eaten by the builder, right? There's a lot of risk inherent in this whole process that can all but eliminate that profit margin. And that's really where the flexibility would be. If we can look at then the second chart here, really just to illustrate what is happening currently in Spokane. So this is projected a few months out. Our builders obviously are projecting 4 to 6 months ahead of time what costs are going to be, because that's kind of what the process typically takes. It's actually a little bit longer right now, but that's a whole different discussion. Based on really current MLS, the median new home construction price is $400,000. So what's interesting is we are seeing the direct cost and the land cost roughly break down at the percentages that we want. But again, look at the land cost. That's $30,000 more than what the kind of average person, the median income in Spokane, can actually afford. You'll notice too that there are some breakdowns here as far as some of the regulatory fees on the land side, as well as permit and impact fees that are baked into that direct cost number. These are really direct government regulations and taxes and fees that are built in that do affect the cost. And you'll note too, the Washington Energy Code, we have new building codes that go into effect on February 1st of next year. It says 2020, it's actually 2021. And we're estimating that it's about $20,000 cost to consumer for compliance with those very much more stringent energy codes. So again, really what I wanted to illustrate here is showing that there is this gap, this sort of missing middle, where we have about $150,000 gap between what homes are currently priced at, the median home price, and what a median income individual is going to be able to afford in our community. We think that that's problematic. We want to see some action taken in order to incentivize and produce homes that do fit that median income price level. As far as the community value, we know that homeownership carries with it all sorts of socioeconomic benefits. We think that that is something that our city should care about, that as a community, we should promote home ownership in order to enable as many people as possible to realize that dream of owning their own home. We also know that when we look at equity generation, wealth generation, really owning a home is a key mechanism for that to happen for people. And we think that we need to do everything we can to help that become true. We also know that housing at all price points are really interconnected. And so, for example, if we relieve kind of the pent-up demand that we see existing within our current rental market, we know that there are estimated around 30 to 40,000 people, which is probably 20,000 homes, individuals who are currently renting in Spokane who are planning to or want to own a home. We know that that relief of all those individuals is going to have an effect on those rental prices. It also means that those homes that get sold means that those individuals are able to use their equity and step up in that housing ladder as well. So really, one home doesn't just affect one family, it affects everyone along that chain. And so it's important to recognize kind of the totality of the effect that can happen when we build even just a single home. So it really begs the question then, how do we build closer to that first graph? How do we kind of pull back from where this train is headed and get more attainable housing available for people in our community? Again, this is a much deeper conversation, but really 4 key areas that I want to mention that affect housing affordability and attainability. The first is low interest rates. So if you heard me say in that first graph, that's based on 5% interest rate. That's kind of a long-term industry standard. We know that right now is a key time for us to act because low interest rates actually mean that money goes further for those individuals who are able to get into home ownership. So now is really a critical time. We also know, secondly, that bringing fixed costs down is going to help. So that looks like allowing for smaller lot sizes, allowing for smaller homes, higher density allowances, increasing the amount of buildable land. All of those things are going to bring some of those fixed costs down, which is going to affect the overall cost of the home and really make it more attainable for more people. Thirdly, we think that we can reduce things like platting fees, permit fees, impact fees, things that are over and above the cost of the home that's added by government. We're not saying that these things should never happen, but we should look at these things, go, how can we maybe waive some of these or reimburse some of these if homes are in that really price point that we are concerned about? How can we incentivize around those options? And then fourthly, we know that increasing housing supply is going to have effect on that cost. We're at record low inventories. It's very problematic. And so the more that we can do now to build homes means that we're going to relieve some of that upward pressure on that cost curve, allow more people to get into home ownership. Lastly, I do want to touch on House Bill 1590, the 0.1% sales tax increase that I know that I'm kicking this off, but I think we're going to be talking about that some today as well. We certainly wonder if now is the right time for something like that. With 100,000 service jobs that are going to be disappearing, we wonder if a regressive tax is going to hit some of those individuals the hardest. Is the right time? I know it's a smaller amount, but we really have some concerns about whether now is the right time to do it. I know down payment assistance has been something that's been talked about with using some of those funds for building homes or getting more housing for people. For three reasons, I think that might be tricky. The first is that it does carry more administrative costs in order to promote, market something like that, to go through the whole process of vetting these individuals, qualifying them. There's certainly higher administrative costs than something like a permit fee waiver. We also are concerned that even if we do make this promise to individuals that they qualify, they're vetted for this down payment assistance, we know that those individuals also are likely going to be qualifying for FHA loans. Right now in the market, we're seeing $60,000 to $80,000 over asking in cash is the prevailing home buyer. A lot of those are from out of area as well. Then there are folks with conventional loans who are putting 30% down. It's also much more attractive to sellers. And so, you look right now on the MLS, there are currently 5 homes that someone who's only qualified for FHA could even put an offer on. That's just not enough. And so we don't think that down payment assistance alone is going to be enough to help alleviate this situation. Lastly, we also know that if we're infusing money into this market, that money supply is really only going to drive that cost higher. It adjusts the cost curve up. And really what we're more concerned about is really leveling off, even bringing down some of that home price cost on the market so that we can make it more attainable for more people. So we really believe that incentives for builders is going to be what is going to effectively make a change for those projects that are going to hit a price point tied to AMI and having waivers, reimbursements for different regulatory fees. We really think that that's going to be a much more effective means of driving down the overall home cost and get us closer to that ideal first graph, making more homes available for more people.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but time is up.
Yes, ma'am. I am done. So good timing. Sorry if I went a little over. I started my stopwatch a little bit late, but I'll hand it off from here. Thanks so much for allowing me the time.
Great. Thank you so much for that information. Our next speaker is Darren Watkins, and Darren is the Government Affairs Director with the Spokane Association of Realtors, and he will give us an update on the area housing study and recommendations. Darren, welcome.
You tell him he's muted.
Oh, and you're muted.
Thank you so much for having us. This is such a dear issue for us. We see this every day, and we keep all the numbers, if you will, for sales and whatnot. And I have to tell you, I know this is a message you've heard from our department before, which is we are in a housing crisis. But let me put some numbers on this to tell you just how bad it continues to be. Tonight, I want to talk about some things. I want to talk about issues with inventory, which really, really, really are bad. I want to talk about who gets hurt the most when those issues happen. We're talking about migration, and it's a new issue that the city and all of us as realtors are going to have to deal with. And then we want to talk about some fixes that we thought about and how some options we might think about moving forward. So I had some slides here. First off, let's just be clear. In the history of our keeping records, we have the lowest level of inventory since we started keeping track of these numbers. So, for example, when a house comes in on the market under $300,000, we are seeing multiple offers and unheard of 30, 40 different offers competing for that same space. And more, we're actually seeing some of those buyers come from outside the area.
Oh, he's muted again.
Get a feel where we have been for, there we go, can we hear that? I want to talk to you about where we've been in the last, just how fast and how fast this is increasing. So it's increasing at an increasing rate. If we can go through the slides here, I'll show you some of these numbers. We'll do this rather quickly to make, there we go. So this is going back in the month of October in 2015. Median price home in Spokane County, about $180,000. Today, that same house costs you $320,000 to buy. Put this in context of how much of a percentage increase we're talking about from year to year, so you can take a look at that. The next slide, you'll see that those numbers, while we start off at 5 and 10% increases in just the last year, our housing prices have increased 20%. That represents a 78% increase since 2015. If you own a home, you're doing really well. But if you're trying to find a home, you're trying to get into the market, you are really chasing a number that continues to move away from you. Let's look now specifically at the inventory issues and how this really has become a supply and demand. The inventory issues continue to, this is just a snapshot, if you will. How many houses were for sale in the marketplace? If we could just go through these quickly, there we go. 2,000 homes, for example, for sale in October of 2015. We measure in terms of how many weeks or months of supply that we have on a marketplace. That's it takes a year full of sales and we divide them out. We're currently at the record low level of about 2 weeks of supply, down to only 424 homes for sale last month in the entire Spokane County. I want to show you some numbers specific to the city of Spokane now, because as you know, some of the lower priced homes are in Spokane. The median price for a home has just gone up now in the city of Spokane, $287,000, which represents a 25% increase in just the last month.
Here.
So we have inventory issues. Now let's take a look, just because council members might be interested in seeing what it looks like for each of the districts. So for the Northeast, that average about 225, the South about 360, and in the Northwest, 276. Now, when we talk about the loan programs, when we talk about the bond programs, first-time home buyers, things like that, those programs aren't really being used that much because there's a lack of inventory. FHA homes for sale in all of the city of Spokane under $300,000 or $250,000, there were 5. So we'll need to move through these slides if I'm going to make my 8 minutes. I'm sorry for trying to talk quickly here. These are some specific to Spokane statistics. Home ownership around the country, 65%. The new numbers that were released by Census shows that home ownership in Spokane down around 51%. Renters about 39.1%. The rest of those numbers are made up in vacancy numbers and some other things that they count. But I want to take a look at how we break apart by race, because I think that's an important conversation for us to have. Whites in Spokane are about the same as the national average. Minorities overall, 44%. But African Americans in Spokane really are falling behind even farther than they were back when we passed the Fair Housing Act at 25%. I cannot find very many markets in the entire country that have a 40-point split. So now we take a look at issues coming up with migration. We're concerned that this conversation that people are having about moving away from large metropolitan areas is starting to affect us. We're seeing 20 and 30-fold people looking at homes here. Our local builders right now are telling us that anywhere from 6 to 8 out of every 10 new homes is being purchased by a new buyer. On top of that, we're seeing driver's license data just last month showed that we have almost triple, if you will, in some months,
So do we have a minute
1,300
left
people
for
coming
him?
from California and Oregon.
minute
And just
left?
remember, if you came from Seattle or Vancouver, you're
got a
not
little
changing
bit
your
of a late
driver's
start,
license,
so
so that
we've
number
got
isn't even
23
there.
minutes left.
Now, if we
We're
could
just
step up,
behind.
we did a survey. We wanted to know what people wanted. And we found some interesting stats. Renters want to buy. 51% of people who are currently renting are looking to buy, even more so amongst minorities. And the number that they talk about that we heard a lot was $200,000. And if you take that number and you apply some federal guidelines and 80% of median income, that's a number that you pretty well come up with. Some other things that we heard from voters was they talked a bit about what should we do next. We gave them some options at the National Association of Realtors, and by a large margin, the number one idea was let's give incentives for building. Let's make this happen. The second part of it was let's also get some creativity in the way we do our zoning. These are some solutions, again, provided by voters. We ran it past them. The second one was taking a look at changing zoning laws to allow alternative housing types. And 68% of people wanted more multifamily. And those were things such as, we talk about townhomes, duplexes, cottages. And again, these are all focused on products that people can buy. The average family in America that owns a home is worth about $171,000. If you're a family that doesn't own a home, your value is about $17,000. We have some solutions that the state has offered. We'd like the city to really take a hard look at. We'd like, for example, for all of us to say, let's make housing ownership a priority. Let's help everyone find that opportunity, whether it's surplus property the city has, tax exemptions for home owners, not just renters. 1923 is a housing bill we'd like to see used more of. It offers some financial incentives directly for cities to think about infill opportunities and changing some things. And then the last piece is we're going to talk about is House Bill 1590. Washington Realtors were behind that. And the important part about this is that this, while there are several sources of funding in our community that have been used for building low-income housing, for rentals, or for other uses, this would essentially be the only source of government money available to help people build and get into home ownership. It's an idea we like very much. We had some, this is the last slide. We had some concerns at our government affairs recent meeting is that I think the same thing we were more about, is this something we can really think about now, right? We know that the legislature is going to be tackling some tax issues. Is this the kind of thing that maybe we should wait just until after the legislative session to ask our citizens to take on? And the last piece is, I think it's very critical for us to still consider the housing task force, because while we, as realtors, put together this fine piece of work, we call it a case for attainable housing. While we did this, really what it's more about is asking those people who provide housing to say, what's it going to take? What is it going to take for us to build houses that are back in that $200,000 range, right? What's getting in the way? We see those houses being built in Airwood Heights. We see them being built in Coeur d'Alene. What can we in Spokane do? And
Hi,
I think
Darren.
it's time for us to really hopefully stand
Sorry
up.
to interrupt,
Make that
Darren, but any last words before? You're good?
Just our thanks for having us here tonight. We get excited about these issues, and we'd love to provide any data that we can to help make good decisions.
Great. Thank you so much for your presentation. And I also just want to say I appreciate the data on minority home ownership, especially the Black home ownership, as someone who's really concerned about equity. So thank you for that. Our next speaker, actually their speakers, are Michelle Girardeau and Deb Elzinga, who will be presenting together. Michelle is the Chief Executive Officer with Habitat for Humanity, and Deb is President and CEO at Community Frameworks, and both will present together on shared equity models and affordable ownership in Spokane. Welcome, Michelle and Deb.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Well, what a very timely discussion as we are all doing this virtually within our homes. So we know how important having a safe, decent, and affordable place to live is as we navigate these very challenging and trying times. Thank you for giving us an opportunity to speak to our organizations. I'm Michelle Gerardo. I'm CEO of Habitat Spokane. We are an affordable home ownership provider here locally. We've been around for 30 years. And tell me this: am I supposed to share our slide deck?
Hannalee can share the slide deck if you need it.
Oh, good. And we have our mission is to put God's love into action by bringing people together to build hope, communities, and homes. Deb, you want to share a little bit about
Sure.
Works?
Sure. Do you want to move to the next slide, Hannalee? Yeah, so I represent Community Frameworks, and we've been around for a long time, since 1974. We do work in both the homeownership realm and also the multifamily rental development realm. And so I do want to say, both Michelle and I want to say thank you to the City Council for putting this event together, and for all the presenters, and for to the community for taking an interest in this really important topic. Go to the next slide. So we've talked a lot about statistics and data, but let's all remind ourselves, as Michelle indicated, how important home is. And we believe that, and I think as many of you also believe, that home really is the foundation of our lives. And we know that when a home allows people to live within their means, that they can really focus on the other important aspects of their lives. And I think right now we've all been reminded, as Michelle said, how important home is when we are all working from home, doing meetings from home, doing school from home, and so on. And probably Thanksgiving, sharing in each other's homes as well. So this slide really wants to pull out the themes that we think underscore the importance of owning a home. So strength, stability, and self-reliance. Home ownership can strengthen important aspects of people's lives, especially as it relates to people's financing, and also how they connect to the community. And then with a quality home, people are more stable. They gain stability, and they find a steadiness, which is really important at all times, but especially right now in the midst of a worldwide pandemic. And then finally, homeownership really does promote self-reliance, because at the core of homeownership is that you have to pay your mortgage every month. And I think it really instills a high level of accountability. You can go to the next slide. So we're just going to talk to you tonight very briefly about shared equity housing. It's a big topic, and we're going to try to give you a taste and a feel for it, but we're not going to be able to get into a great level of detail about it. So with shared equity housing, what we're trying to do is build a bridge to home ownership. As other speakers have indicated, many people in our community are renting. They would love to be homeowners, but they have some challenges. And especially for people with lower incomes, we know that people lack a down payment. They come to us with credit history challenges. And then also, as indicated, there's a very low supply of quality properties that families can actually afford.
Am I up, Deb?
You're up. You're up.
So, as we've kind of talked, we're both highlighting some of the challenges that we're seeing, but also what we believe is a really solid solution in achieving ownership. So providing a shared equity option or option helps to close that gap and make homeownership actually achievable. So shared equity is an innovative way to create ownership opportunities by closing that gap between what someone can afford to pay in a mortgage. So we saw some pretty high numbers, and the actual cost to own a home. And this actually catalyzes solutions and investment to make the American dream possible for all of our neighbors in need, not just people that are on the higher end of the area median income spectrum, but this allows us as community organizers and just neighbors that are trying to provide an opportunity to get people the tools that they need to get across the finish line. Next slide. So sometimes when we think about housing, we think, okay, you can either rent or you can own, but there isn't a really solid path or understanding of what that looks like to get from rentership to ownership. And shared equity is a really excellent way to kind of create that path or that stepping stone to the American dream of fully owning a home. So in between that rentership and that ownership concept, these stepping stones include limited equity co-ops, community land trusts or ground leases, and deed restrictions. And as Cupid mentioned earlier today, also this is a really solid way to make sure that we are being diligent and thoughtful in making sure that our neighbors aren't displaced, and really preserving the integrity of neighborhoods where everyone has an opportunity to thrive. Next slide. So Deb and I are going to talk about two main components of this. I'm going to speak to the kind of deed restriction aspects of it when it comes to single family homes. And what we really look at is that the buyer and the nonprofit or the seller are going into a partnership. They're going in together to purchase the home. So public funds can be used for down payment assistance. And we've found that that is an exceptional way to help buy down these extraordinary costs that we're seeing, to make that an attainable opportunity for families that are trying to reach the American dream. It's an additional investment from the nonprofit that brings down the cost of the home to one that actually will fit their budget. So as we look at what's affordable, an affordable home must be no more than 30% of your income. So how can we make that attainable? The shared equity comes into play when a buyer sells the home, and then that down payment assistance is repaid, and any gains on the investment are then shared between the homeowner and the nonprofit. So that's the partnership. Repayments and investment gains are then paid forward to support the program for future buyers. Next slide.
Then I'm going to touch on another strategy within the shared equity housing models, and that's the idea of co-op housing. And co-op housing, co-ops and cooperatives go back many, many decades, and have been a part of part of the housing answer, although not very familiar here in our region. So the main advantage for the buyer in a co-op model is that it is the co-op entity that gets the financing. So the person who may have credit challenges, for example, doesn't have to go to the bank to get that mortgage, but rather they buy a share in the co-op. So a co-op can be a condo, it could be a multifamily complex, or a collection of smaller townhouses. So there's a variety of ways that a co-op model can be put together. And as I said, the co-op obtains the financing of the building, which means that this could be the answer for a lot of people in our community who maybe have a good income, who have paid their bills on time, but they just don't have that credit history that a bank would be able to underwrite a loan for them. And then just as Michelle said, the same shared equity structure applies to a co-op model. So funds are used for the down payment assistance. The nonprofit investment can bring down the cost of that unit of housing so that it fits the home buyer's budget. And then again, the down payment assistance is repaid, and any gains on the investment are then shared between the homeowner and the nonprofit. And then repayments and investment gains are then paid forward to support the program for future buyers. And so shared equity housing, you can go to the next slide, Annalie, thanks. So shared equity home ownership provides multiple benefits, just as traditional home ownership does. Homeowners are better protected if the housing market declines. Homeowners build household wealth. There's a public-private nonprofit investment is preserved for ongoing program success. And we really believe, as I think many others do, that the community really benefits from the family success and stability that ownership brings.
Well, and I'd say too, Deb, that if any time is right, now is the time to really make an investment in housing. Mm-hmm. All of us that are speaking tonight in this forum are, in very comfortable places, and I want to really stress the idea that if we want, our economy to come back, we have to make sure that there are opportunities for that missing middle. As the nation confronts our history of systemic racism, really examining all aspects of this reality is really critical. Long-standing practices and policies related to access to homeownership have kept large numbers of Black, Indigenous, and people of color out of this essential part of the American dream. And really, this shouldn't just be a dream, right? This should be obtainable. And shared equity opportunities like this is one of the ways that that can be achieved by the many renters and homeowners that are looking to either downsize or to make that shift to home ownership. Next slide. So shared equity models are not the end all be all, but it is part of the solution and can be part of the solution. When we think about what home ownership can be, and even just some of the smallest barriers that our neighbors have in obtaining home ownership, this really seems like a solid game plan. It provides really simple access as long as we have the tools. And as someone that I really love and cherish had told me the other day that you really need to stop using the word complicated. And this sounds very complicated, but it's not complicated. It just takes some time. And so if we have these tools in place now, which includes the funding, which includes the community support, which includes the advocacy around creating something that could really be impactful, we're looking at a solid continuum of housing that doesn't just stop at one housing solution or another, and it really allows individuals and families to continue moving up. So, these shared equity strategies, enacting and being forthright in enacting anti-racist policies and practices related to home ownership, and the significant funding, all of those things are needed in order to create really vibrant and intentional communities that we all hope that we can, enjoy.
And just to add on just a quick thing, when we were talking to Cupid Alexander the other day, he framed this idea of equity as it relates to housing in one of the best ways I've ever heard. And the way he framed it was, it's called housing justice. And I think that is a great way of really underscoring what it actually means. Yeah. And then in terms of funding, there's different opinions on the 1590 funding. My organization, and I know Michelle's organization's Habitat, does support the passage of 1590 because we know as housing practitioners that there simply isn't enough funding. There aren't enough resources, and having flexible resources such as that which comes from 1590 could really, really bolster not only the shared equity approach, but other approaches and other strategies and other and fill other housing needs in the community for a long time to come.
Absolutely. So I think we have a video by chance.
Do you have a video? Do we have time?
Yeah, we do. We're good.
Okay. Hannah Lee's pulling up the video right now.
Oh, wonderful. So I would just say too that, as we watch this video, really a safe, decent, affordable home, it just means mountains. It means so much. And as we all, I think, take advantage sometimes, it's very important.
Gosh, I think I'm going to lose it. Hold on.
Sorry. Okay.
Yeah, así está.
I don't think anybody will ever understand how grateful my family is.
You good? Am I on? Thank you, Michelle and Deb, for that presentation. By the way, that is a very powerful video, so thank you for sharing that at the end, and really appreciate your sharing about the shared equity housing model. Our next speaker is Keith Kelly, and Keith is the owner of Kelly Rental Properties. He currently serves as immediate past president for Spokane Housing Ventures, as well as serving on 2 task forces with the city of Spokane, one pertaining to landlord-tenant law improvements and the second pertaining to current concerns around housing affordability. Welcome, Keith.
Thank you very much. I first want to say what an honor it is to serve on this panel with everyone else. It's hard to follow Deb and Michelle and Darren and Isaiah for that matter. So thank you all for the opportunity to be here. My involvement with affordable housing is very multifaceted, and it's a big passion of mine, but I believe that my perspective for this panel is intended to be representative more of concerns relating to landlords. And for that, I've organized a few quick introductory comments, but I know there will be many questions toward the end, so I'll try to keep my time short so we can address public questions and concerns as well. Historically, looking across the country, Spokane has been one of the more affordable places to live. However, in recent years, changes in demographics and market trends have produced a negative impact on housing affordability. Some points have been mentioned already, so some of this may be a little bit on repeat, but in any event, demographic trends show the number of people moving to Spokane is greater than the amount of people moving out, plus the number of new housing units that are being constructed. And in short, what this means is the disparity between supply and demand is growing. What this means is housing prices are going up, and I believe one of our panelists has already brought forward data showing that home values over the last year has gone up. In his slide, it showed 25%. I see 23.5%. Regardless of the data you're looking at, it's tremendous. It's I don't know if it's precedented or not, but it's incredible. On new construction, rents are increasing at a pace greater than increases in inflation. We're seeing rental increases on new construction close to 7 to 8%. Existing rentals have been holding relatively flat, however, due to COVID-related legislation and such. But I believe that we can all agree that when we're out of a COVID world, so to speak, we're going to be seeing rents going up again across the board. Intuitively, most of us may imagine this is great data for landlords, but such is not truly the case. The increased expenses of a mortgage on a newly purchased home is greatly outpacing the increases in market rents, meaning margins are shrinking for landlords and are becoming less enticing for those who would wish to provide housing for others. In the last year, assessed property values have gone up roughly 35%. So even existing property owners are feeling the pinch on cash flow and therefore have less margin to offer for property maintenance or employment for property managers, maintenance staff, contractors, and the like. Now, all these market trends are independent of factors relating to our COVID world, and I don't wish to dwell too much on that. It is a completely different world that we are living in right now with mandates coming from our governor, which has had a real negative impact on landlords in particular. I spoke with the president of our landlord association, Steve Corker, earlier today, who I believe would also bring great perspective to the conversation we're having tonight. He's hearing more landlords concerned about selling their properties than he is landlords concerned about collecting rents, which was a surprise commentary to me, but one that I think is something that we should all bear in mind. In short, I just want to add, it's a really tough world for all of us right now. If there's one point that I would like for our listeners to remember tonight, it'd simply be this, that landlords and tenants are not inherently adversarial with one another. Conversely, as the truth is, we all depend on one another. Renters wouldn't have a place to live and landlords would be out of business if we weren't dependent on one another. In my 15 years of property management, I've always operated from a tenant-centered model for property management, and I believe that to be the greatest asset of my business model. Everything else tends to fall into place when tenants and landlords recognize our best interests are intermingled, not at odds with one another. And for us to get out of this housing crisis, we need to do everything we can to incentivize new housing of all types. This will put downward pressure on inflation of property values and rents, and will also create an environment where landlords are more open to consider tenants with blemishes on their record who in today's environment struggle mightily to compete with housing vacancies. So that's, I have so much more I could mention, but in the interest of time, I'm just gonna keep this a bit truncated for now. Once again, I'd just like to thank our City Council and staff to be a part of this instructive dialogue.
Thank you, Keith, for that. Our final set of speakers are Edie Reisour and Amber Johnson. They will be presenting back to back. Edie is the Executive Director of Transitions, and she will provide a video presentation. And Amber Johnson is with SNAP, who will give us a full spectrum of housing opportunities in Spokane. Welcome, Edie and Amber.
Thank you, Rowena. Yes, I'm the Executive Director at Transitions, and our mission is to end poverty and homelessness for women and children in Spokane. We're a local Spokane organization. I did want to say, first of all, welcome, Cupid. We're excited to have you and have that position filled, and look forward to meeting you and working with you closely. We're going to show a video that I might say is a little bit of a propaganda, and that it was developed for one of our fundraisers, but I think it's a story that's important to hear, and I thought this evening it would be important to tell a story and listen to that story about someone who moves from homelessness into a rental, but also employment. So, Lee, our producer, can you take it away?
It's really important to have a safety net of some kind. And honestly, it's just regard. It's just unconditional, positive regard.
You know, I'm just as good as anybody else. I believe that everybody has value. They just have to see the value inside themselves.
Thank you.
Transitions helped me build a better life for myself and helped me accomplish all my goals. I've came so far in such a short period of time because of what Transitions has done for me.
So Mariah just told me she's 28 now, which means I met her when she was 23, 5 years ago. We were just talking, she said, I had to learn to love myself. And that's exactly right. The women that we work with can become so self-hating and so filled with shame about their lives that it's very hard to forgive themselves.
I was a really well-behaved kid when I was a kid, but when I became a teenager, I started making really bad choices. When I was 13, I ran away from home and I started using drugs, and I got into really unhealthy relationships all throughout my teenage years.
She was running away from her mom and me and everybody through her teen years, and she was homeless and on the streets. You know, I'd see her and my heart would break and she'd run away from me.
And then I got my housing voucher when I was 23, and I stayed clean for almost a year, but I didn't want it for myself. I wasn't ready. And I went back out, and for a couple more years.
I would see her, she would come into the hearth, and she clearly was no longer housed and was back on the street, and it was scary. It was scary just imagining what was going on.
And this time she really went bad. I mean, she was living in the House of Charity. They would pick her up in the middle of the night. She was sleeping out in the snow. I would drive by every day, and I would see her walking around in circles, and she was losing her mind. I hate meth. I hate meth.
It was like, looking back, I even feel sad for myself because I was just, what I was doing, I was out there all winter long without a coat, and it was insanity. It was so hard for me to get out of that lifestyle. But I prayed to God, and right after, a cop kept telling me to go to community court. So he arrested me, and I went to community court.
This was different. You could tell this was different. And it was very serendipitous because the Homeyard Cottages was just accepting people on the wait list. And I'm like, Mariah, here's the application. You got to get on this if you really want this to happen. And she just was amazing.
I went to my parents and I told everybody, I'm ready this time. I'm actually going to stay clean, and I'm starting a life for myself. I'm going to do good, and I'm going to do it. I'm going to show everybody. And so I did.
She just blossomed. I mean, we have people come into the hearth all the time and say, oh, I couldn't have made it without you. And that's a lovely thought, and probably there's some truth to that. But the truth is they couldn't have made it without themselves. And they did the hard work.
I moved in here, and I was all happy, and all these good things were happening. After living here for a couple months, I started going to barista training at the New Leaf Bakery. And that was a lot of fun. At the same time, I was going to mental health and outpatient drug and alcohol. And not only do I have hope, but I'm carrying it out.
A lot of times coming from homelessness, people don't have a lot of trust and they don't really know how to be a neighbor or a tenant. So really just having a safe place to learn how to grow and become the person that they want to be.
So our services have really been designed to meet people in whatever place they find themselves in, and that might be needing a shower and a warm place to be, to people who are so eager to go out, find a job, get employment. It really looks at the spectrum of where people are and recognizes it's not a linear progression at all, and that the support folks need in this community comes from housing, and it comes from employment, and it comes from supportive services and everything that we do. So it really is designed to be truly wraparound and truly honor how complex people are and how complex people's needs are.
I have a clipboard, and it used to have all my accomplishments on it, like I graduated ukulele class. I didn't skip any classes, so they actually gave me an ukulele. Now, I'm actually living life. It just keeps getting better and better, and then I got my license, and driving is a lot of fun. So there's a lot of things that's happened.
It was a miracle because what they said she had was drug-induced schizophrenia from the meth. And she's returned to me as my little princess and my favorite person in the whole world, and she's my hero today. And I'm so proud of her.
It's always the story that everybody wants to hear about how someone just, found their way through sort of the darkness of their lives and they blossomed, and, we all love a happy ending. And, but I think it's really important, and I think what Transitions does really well, is that we welcome people at all stages of their journey, whatever their journey may be, and we provide those opportunities for people, but we let people make their own decision.
She wants to go to college now. She's registered for the fall. She's working at Safeway. I just blessed, just blessed.
I'm living a good life, and so now I have pictures of new memories that I'm making, and I'm sponsoring people in AA, and that makes me feel really good to be able to reach out to somebody who needs me. And so now I want to go to college and do that for a living, is help people.
Everyone deserves a roof over their head. Everyone deserves a home. And a lot of times, other goals in life can't be met until you have that safety and that consistency with being housed.
Transitions, we give people chance after chance after chance. If somebody loses their housing here and they come into the Hearth, we'll try again. And, or if they, get to Miriam's and discover they're pregnant, they can go to TLC. I mean, we really try to put something in place that will help to support them and help them be able to lift themselves up. The community can support us and help us in doing that, and understand that we're not always going to have a happy ending, but we're always going to have a happier ending. You have to believe that you're worth it, and you have to have the courage to step out there and really do it.
Thanks, Annalee. I wanted to mention that although that video shows a hopeful situation, there are many challenging populations that have great difficulty finding housing. And in particular, I wanted to lift up two. One is people who are dealing with domestic violence. Spokane has the highest rate of domestic violence in the state of Washington. 1 in every 3 women or 1 in every 4 men will experience domestic violence in their life. And although HUD has said that domestic violence survivors should be served through transitional housing programs, as a best practice, they actually don't fund them. The second group that I'm especially concerned about are the housing for people who are returning to community who have completed their incarcerations. There's virtually no options for them. So I want to encourage you to take seriously the concerns about funding. When we did the cottages, which was what was pictured in the video, huge complexities, and I will use that word, complex or complicated, about pulling together funding to make a project like that happen. Deb knows Community Frameworks was our developer on that project. We have city home money in it. We have city CDBG, low-income housing tax credit money, federal home bank money, and also private capital money. So it's incredibly complex. And 1590 for me is really critical to get moving. I understand that it's a difficult time, but the longer we wait, the more challenging it is going to be for housing development. So I'm going to shift it over to Amber now. She's been kind enough to let me show that video. So thanks, Amber.
Absolutely. Thank you, Edie. Mariah's story is definitely a shining example of why housing is so critical in our community. Hannah Lee, can you go ahead and pull up my slide deck for me? And while she's doing that, I'll just start here by saying good evening. As Rowena mentioned, my name is Amber Johnson, and I am the Director of Mission Support at Spokane Neighborhood Action Partners, commonly known as SNAP here in Spokane. This evening, I'm going to share some information regarding housing needs in our community along a full spectrum, and with our perspective as a multi-service organization here in Spokane. I really thank you for the opportunity to share this information with you, and look forward to speaking with you afterwards. Next slide. For Spokane to have a healthy housing market, there really does need to be a full spectrum of opportunities available. Everything from a variety of shelter options to affordable and market rentals to home ownership opportunities and programs and services to keep people in their homes. All of these are needed to really support our neighbors in finding a safe place to call home here in Spokane. Next slide. As noted earlier, while 61.5% of Spokane's white households are homeowners, our minority populations are still suffering from the effects of redlining and other systemic disparities. For those of you unfamiliar with redlining, it was a series of rules and systems, policies that were set by the government to define not only which neighborhoods were low risk and high risk, but which types of homeowners were low risk and high risk. Redlining was used to keep Black, Indigenous, and person of color households out of certain neighborhoods in Spokane. And during the time of redlining, realtors would steer minority populations to non-white neighborhoods such as Logan, East Central, or Cliff Cannon. While redlining was eventually outlawed, its harmful legacy continues. As was mentioned earlier, home ownership is incredibly vital to building equity and assets in families, and our Black, Indigenous, and person of color populations are still trying to catch up and build equity for their families and households to this day. And our minimum wage workforce in Spokane struggles to find affordable home opportunities in today's housing market. As a couple of other presenters noted far better than I can, there are really very few homes for sale under $150,000 in Spokane. I don't have the same access to the data sources they use, but even I could tell how few opportunities our households living at our median incomes really have to achieve the dream of home ownership. Next slide. And for that home ownership to be accessible to our neighbors, even those working multiple minimum wage jobs, they really need access to loan capital and lenders willing to work with their barriers, and they need access to down payment assistance. These funds are really difficult to secure, even for the nonprofits and organizations operating these types of programs. For example, in 2019, there were 10 organizations in the state of Washington that applied for new home construction and down payment assistance programs with the Housing Trust Fund. The Housing Trust Fund is a key funding source for affordable multifamily and single-family development in the state of Washington. Those 10 applications from those organizations totaled over $34 million, but only about $5 million was funded, or about 14% of those total requests. To go hand in hand with that, we also need land available to develop. So land banks or land trusts are becoming more critical. Having options for nonprofits to purchase land while we work to secure funding is an important piece of this puzzle. Land banks or land trusts can also help ensure we're making the best use of land and homes left vacant due to foreclosures. These long abandoned homes are often called zombie properties and could be much better put to use by housing our neighbors and therefore improving the property values of the surrounding neighborhoods. Next slide. Even if someone is fortunate enough to purchase or acquire a home, they now need to contend with maintaining it. A new roof, a broken sewer pipe, a furnace replacement can significantly harm a household just barely eking by on their mortgage payments. For those living paycheck to paycheck, as so many of us are right now, a repair of this nature can be devastating. It's already hard to cover food, transportation, and medical needs, and if homeowners don't have options available for loan capital or programs to assist with these repairs, this could lead to a loss of homeowners insurance, a loss of property tax revenue for our area, loss of the family home, foreclosure, uprooting kids from schools, and displacing the adults from stable jobs. Next slide. As you've already heard, vacancies and rental units continue to run between 0 and 1%. Homes are abandoned due to foreclosure, continue to sit empty. There's a shortage of affordable home purchase options and a decrease of funding to support the development of new homes and home ownership programs. A local source of funds is critical to developing new multifamily units and to support the dream of home ownership for our neighbors. Local funding can help supplement depleting state and federal sources to ensure all of our neighbors in Spokane have a place to call home. Next slide. So on behalf of the 44,766 people that SNAP served last year in 2019, we thank you for your interest in learning more about housing needs in our community. And if you have any questions about any of the programs that I mentioned this evening, there's a couple of phone numbers you can call. You can visit our website, and I look forward to fielding questions as you have them as well. Thank you so much for your time this evening.
Thank you, Edie and Amber, for that. I want to thank all the presenters that we had tonight for your contribution. And I just want to remind everyone that in this past almost hour and a half, we covered a lot of data around supply, affordability. We talked a little bit about the demographics of our current homeowners, the disparity in supply and demand, some of the market trends. We also heard a big context in setting things up. I appreciate Amber talking about redlining and the impact of redlining on our housing, because that to me sets the context that we always need to remember that there's history here that we need to keep in mind. And redlining is actually an example of systemic racism, which Michelle and Deb brought up in their presentation. I also appreciated the solutions that people presented, that our presenters presented tonight, including the shared equity housing model, talking about land banks and land trusts, and also realizing that owning a home is one challenge, maintaining a home is another challenge. So those are some key takeaways for me tonight. And I also want to thank you all for the videos that you shared. Those were very powerful. And with that, I am going to turn it over to Council President Beggs, who will talk to us about solutions and new funding options for housing.
Thank you so much, Rowena, for facilitating this evening and providing your perspective for all the years that you've served people and all the issues your organization is devoted to. I just wanted to remind people that if you want to testify, you can still go to our Spokane City Council Facebook page and sign up there. We've got several people signed up, but we have room for more. So go ahead and do that. I'm going to turn it over to Melissa Morrison in just a moment to talk about 1590 a little more. But just wanted to, again, set some context of the need and potential funding. So I mentioned at the top that there are 3 potential funding sources for creating more of this affordable housing in the middle, especially focused on first-time owners and people staying in their neighborhoods. One is that 1406, where we have some money coming in, about $500,000 a year coming in. The other was the TIF legislation 2497, and the council a few weeks ago, at the request of the West Central area, extended that and up to 50% of those funds can now go to affordable housing, again, focused on ownership. And then 1590 is a new opportunity that just came to the council in the first part of October, was the first time we could look at it. And so I was going to ask Melissa Morrison to share a little bit about the ordinance that's in front of council for next Monday that would implement 1590 in the city. And Melissa is the manager of housing initiatives for City Council and has been working on these issues for City Council and facilitating stakeholder groups for a couple years now. Melissa, why don't you share with us a little bit about what this ordinance would do in terms of implementing 1590?
Thank you. So 1590 is that we have been talking about in some community stakeholder groups throughout the last year and a half to 2 years, when some of the local stakeholders came and said that a local controlled funding source is really what they thought would be a good solution for some of the housing struggles that Spokane was facing. Goals of 1590 would be about 100 new units a year over the next 10 to 20 years, is really what we're trying to work towards, is using this 1/10 of 1% sales tax to increase supply of housing opportunities in our community. The average cost to a household is about $25 a year, and it would raise about $6 million yearly, with a focus on missing middle, workforce housing, and home ownership opportunities. The tax can be 60% can be spent up, at least 60% can be spent on new units, while the remaining funds can be used towards supportive services to help people stay and live successfully in their homes. So it's a conversation we've been having over the last couple of years, and council will be considering it next week. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Melissa, for your work on that. And I just wanted to, for all three programs, what I've been most excited about is the group of people who have been working in the community of how could we do this differently. And as you heard from the realtors, they really like this idea of ownership for occupants. And you heard from the nonprofit developers that they like that idea, and that people tend to thrive on that. But traditionally in Spokane, we haven't had that kind of programming that we could do that. And with some of the creative funding ideas of down payment assistance and cooperative ownership, we can really provide housing to what a lot of people are calling the missing middle now. If you lived in Spokane 15 years ago and you were working and your partner was working, you could afford a house. And there were lots of affordable housing. Now there are literally tens of thousands of people who are both working and can't afford that housing. And they just can't get into the market, and it's not going to get any better. And so this is really a catalytic kind of project that will take these funds, build units, and get people into some housing equity. And then as they exit out of it as owners, some of that money that we put into it to get them into it with down payment assistance or some other programming, they pay that back out. So those funds are then repurposed to get somebody else housed who is in the same situation of being a first-time homeowner. And that's what's really missing. We didn't have to worry about that in Spokane very much several years ago. But now even people who have good paying jobs are having a hard time doing it. So this would really fill that gap. And you saw in some of the slides from the realtors that essentially a lot of people want to buy houses, but their idea of buying an affordable house and realistically is under $200,000, and those units just don't exist. So 1590 would put 100 new units a year at that price point that people could get into it, and then they would work up their equity and eventually transition into other housing. And so we would do that largely through this funding, and we would have a housing advisory subcommittee to the City Council of people in the housing industry, both profit and nonprofit, people who have lived experience of wanting to become first-time home buyers and not being able to, people who have been redlined, and really coming up with projects that will be, I would say, outside the box. And one of the reasons I'm so excited that the city's hired Cupid Alexander is that he is an expert on these innovative ways of doing that we can start doing that, and not just the typical thing of, well, you're going to be a permanent low-income renter, subsidized, or somehow you're going to make it in the market, or you're just going to be a permanent renter. This will give us some options on that. So I'm really looking forward to those innovative ways to be that bridge that Michelle and Deb showed us of getting people to become owners of the places where they live. So with that, I'm going to turn it over. Any city council members who have questions for the presenters, you can press on the participants button and see who's still on the line. I see several presenters there, but if there are council members who either have questions of presenters or just want to make a comment in response, we'll start with them before we go to members of the general public. And if you're, can you do your, oh, you have it up there.
Council President Beggs?
Yes, Councilmember Wilkerson.
Yes, thank you. Thank you to all the presenters who came tonight and showed the various ways, opportunities, and challenges before us. I'm a big fan of 1590. When I bought my first home, it was through a government program. It was a HUD House 235, and they helped me get in. So I understand that people can get help and then move on to be contributing citizens. And that's what I am hoping for in Spokane. This issue is too big for just a couple of developers to come together. This is a community-wide issue that we're facing. I always say the one cannot help the many, but the many cannot help the one. And so thank all those who are committed to helping people have a permanent home or a place to call home in Spokane.
Thank you, Council Member. Any other council members with questions, looking, or comments?
Mr. President, this is Karen Stratton.
Yes, Councilmember Stratton.
I'm sorry, Candace, Mom, and I have been bouncing to another meeting up in Garland, but I just wanted to echo Betsy, what Betsy has said, that this is very, very important. And one of the things that I'm telling people is that we all know that this shortage exists, and we're trying our very best to find a way to get some more affordable housing in the community. But what I'm telling people is that the way that I'm looking at this is we pay for it now with that $25 a month and providing safe
a year
accommodations for people and home ownership, or we pay for it down the road when we have more and more people that are unable to either afford their own homes or even pay rent. So that's been my feeling about this all along is our choice, or my choice, is supporting upfront, being, making that choice to be, to move this forward and to start looking at solutions now rather than what are we going to do when we see more and more people living in their cars or living at grandma's or living with aunts and uncles.
Mm-hmm.
So I appreciate everybody coming together tonight. I'm sorry that we had to go back and forth with meetings, but that's really what I'm stressing with people that I'm talking to is, let's be upfront and let's think of creative solutions and get it done rather than waiting until it's more of a crisis.
Thank you, Councilmember Stratton. Looking up at the board, other council members with any questions or comments for any of the presenters? All right. I'm not seeing any, but so if I'm missing you,
Council President?
Yeah. Councilmember Mumm.
This is Candace Mumm, and I just really appreciated hearing from different voices tonight and personal experiences, and I know we're running short on time, and I really want to hear from the public because we've had so little community engagement because of COVID. I want to hear from other folks. I am also hearing the home builders and the realtors who are saying, is this the right time to tax people? But I also want to say that we as a city can look at our own finances. The assumption that we have to tax people in order to provide this kind of housing may not be the case. I know we're at the end of the budget season, we haven't prepared for this, but we certainly talked about having someone dedicated to this as in a housing position. And I am committed to looking at new revenue sources as a finance chair and continuing to have that conversation about how to build up our city to have a sustainable program within the city that we work with the mayor on. So it will be implemented, and I look forward to having further conversations with folks on that.
Thank you, Councilmember Mumm. Any other council members? All right. So we do have some people signed up to testify. Oh, hang on just one second. Yeah. And so I'm just going to read in order of how I'm going to call on you, just so you know. First is going to be Christopher Savage, then Jordan Bemis, then Nicolette Ochiltree, then Terry Anderson, then Angel Tomeo Sam, and then Charity Baggett Singh, I believe. I might not be pronouncing that. And so we'll have you, I'll invite you to press *3, which will raise your hand, and then Ms. Allers will tell me, and then you'll have 3 minutes to testify. So go ahead, Mr. Savage, if you want to hit *3. All right. So great to have you here this evening. Go ahead and introduce yourself to everyone, and you have 3 minutes. And if you are getting close to going over, I'll let you know you have like 10 seconds left.
Thank you. My name is Christopher Savage. I reside in the Balboa South Indian Trail neighborhood. I really want to have all this stuff be attainable, but from all the information that I've seen and from what I'm getting across a bunch of other information is that I don't know how this is going to be possible. We don't have the resources. We don't have the land available. We don't have the labor for it. And not only that, but just in my neighborhood with the South Balboa and the Indian Trail, we just nixed a 18-acre development that was going to happen, I think, a year or two ago up on the 5 Mile Prairie. And the North Indian Trail, they also stopped a apartment complex that was going to be by Harlan Douglas back in 2008. So I want to try to create affordable housing for people here in Spokane, but I just don't know how it's going to be possible with all of that in mind. And that's just my opinion on that. So thank you for your time, and I appreciate all what you've done for Spokane, for all of you guys. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Savage. Next up is Jordan Bemis. If you want to hit *3 and raise your hand. Also, I should have said this at the beginning, but if you're, we have a significant delay between the video and the actual goings on. So if you do want to testify, you should be listening on your phone for my comment. Otherwise, you'll hear it later. So if you're on the list of testimony, please switch to your phone so you'll have that. We'll try you again, Jordan, in a few minutes. But next is Nicolette Ochiltree. If you want to hit *3. All right. Welcome. Go ahead and introduce yourself, and you have 3 minutes.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Let's talk about supply and demand and affordable housing. Long ago, Adam Smith had this idea that public interests were best addressed through economic choices, and that in a free market, a sort of invisible hand will regulate supply and demand appropriately. So if there's a demand for affordable housing, why hasn't the supply chain caught up? Well, one reason is because it's more profitable to build and rent unaffordable housing, and there's a lack of that, too. You see, the law of supply and demand doesn't happen in a vacuum. It plays out in the real world, full of friction. So what happens to those who can no longer afford to be consumers? Well, when consumers get priced out of a good they're used to consuming, they typically stop consuming that good or switch to a cheaper alternative. But what if that good or service is necessary for survival, like housing? Suddenly, Smith's Hand is not there to offer a hand up or a handout. It can only help those who can afford to participate in the free market. Admission to the free market itself is not free. You got to pay to play. The most dangerous thing we can do right now is to believe that Smith's Hand will solve the housing crisis. It won't. We can't keep treating the symptoms and ignoring the disease. The limitations of the free market to solve the housing crisis is undoubtedly why we're considering this levy in the first place. It's not enough just to build more affordable housing units, though. We need to make sure that the housing that tenants are already in remains affordable, too. And in reality, this is just another way to build affordable housing. And in some cases, this can be more cost-effective than merely building more units. Displacement is expensive and traumatizing for everyone. Any effort to effectively combat the housing crisis and to give renters a legitimate path to homeownership must include strengthening tenant rights. If not, building affordable housing units is practically useless and borderline harmful for the very people they're meant to protect. And we have to start with just cause eviction. No other tenant's rights can be protected effectively without just cause eviction. It ensures discrimination and corruption do not have extra corners in which to hide. It's a foundational need, and it's a preventative measure that addresses the growing threat our citizens face when they are a paycheck away from being without a place to live or a meal to eat. Not only is it fiscally responsible, it's also ethically responsible. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us. And next, I have Terry Anderson. If you would like to hit *3. All right, we're not seeing you there, Terry. How about Jordan Bemis, *3? Oh, all right. Looks like we do have you, Terry. You want to go ahead and introduce?
Yes.
We can hear you if you want to introduce
Okay.
yourself, and we've got 3 minutes.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I don't follow directions well. Well, I really wasn't going to testify. I really wanted to listen in, but I'm so impressed with this forum tonight that I wanted to thank you for putting this on and thank Rowena for doing such an excellent job facilitating. And I wanted to ask if you would do a forum similar to this when you are considering tenant protections. You mentioned earlier that there was a forum or a series of forums for the tenant protections, but as you recall, it wasn't nearly as simple as this process has been tonight, where we could actually have meaningful conversations. And I mean, we can say the blessings of COVID have put us in remote meetings, but I really would hope that we would have something similar that could be educational, and people could hear and learn about the issues that are affecting tenants and landlords. It really is, like the previous caller said, probably one of the reasons that's leading to the need for a housing levy. I am the director of the Spokane office of the Tenants Union of Washington State, and we do support 1590. We support adding affordable housing. And I got to tell you that part of the presentation that I was most impressed with was the shared equity piece. That is something that's always been a goal for equity in housing, and something that the Tenants Union has been working with in coalitions throughout the nation. So I would hope that you would add tenant-owned buildings to shared equity with a tenant's first right to refuse on offers to purchase. So I think that this is very hopeful, and I'm feeling hopeful that we can move forward, and so that everybody can live in peace and stability. But the one thing I really wanted to point out, that throughout this night we've heard conversations about the racial divide in home ownership, and I really want to point out what that means. When you say that 20% of black households are homeowners, that means 80% are renters or experiencing homelessness. When you say the majority of indigenous and people of color households are also the majority, or that only around 40% are homeowners, that means the majority of the communities of color in Spokane are renters. And if we want true equity, and we need to make sure that the protections that homeowners get and the protections that tenants get are similar so that we can all live in safe, secure, and stable housing. Thank you.
Thanks so much for sharing this evening, Terry, and we'll continue to talk about next steps, but I think there is potential for future forums, but thanks so much. Next would be Angel, Tomeo, Sam. I asked for Jordan again. Oh, sorry. Angel, hang on for 1 second. Jordan, if you are there, Jordan Bemis, if you would like to hit *3.
Hi, this is Jordan Bemis, and I work with World Relief here in Spokane.
Yep.
We are a Christian nonprofit. We help resettle refugees, and we work with immigrants here in Spokane. But first, I just want to say thank you for putting on this forum. I've loved what we've been talking about, what we've been hearing. I also just want to say thank you to Spokane for being a welcoming city. It just shows a lot about the character of the people of the city, and I love that. In most cases, the people that we work with, they have never had a home that has wanted them or welcomed them. So when they come here, having an apartment and a safe place for them, it brings them so much peace, and then allows them to focus on adjusting and getting a job and eventually becoming self-sufficient. But finding that stable, safe, and affordable housing is it can be a barrier, but it's an important aspect of helping these refugees and other immigrants move from a place of what is pretty vulnerable to stability, and then to being a valuable participant in our community. And I just wanted to give you an example. I mean, I've worked for World Relief here in Spokane for the last 9 years, and I've seen families come with nothing, with no English, and just like I'm thinking, how is this going to work? But they get set up with housing, they learn English, they find jobs, and eventually I see them again 4 or 5 years later, and they've bought their first home. They've opened up their own business, and now they are a thriving part of our community. So we believe, and I think a lot of people in Spokane also believe, that a thriving immigrant community in Spokane makes our city better for all of us. But just that lack of sufficient housing and affordable housing, it's a pretty big barrier. So just thank you for your time.
All right. Thank you, Jordan, so much for sharing that perspective. And please give our best to your Executive Director, Mark. Next is Angel, Tomeo, Sam. If you want to hit *3, Angel. All right. We're not seeing Angel. Charity Baggett Singh. I'm trying to pronounce that correctly. Charity, if you're there, if you could hit *3. All right, Charity, go ahead and introduce yourself and share your thoughts for up to the next 3 minutes.
Hi, I'm Charity, and I am a minority and an immigrant. I arrived in Spokane in December 1991 with one suitcase. And my feedback and why there is a housing crisis is there's no justice for landlords. Not all landlords are bad. Many of us who have extra homes want to help and provide affordable housing, but there are also bad tenants. few months ago, or last year, one of my rentals was trashed. The judge dismissed my case, allowed my previous tenant to walk away scot-free without reparations after destroying my property in excess of $18,000 in damages. In court, the tenant admitted making the damages on record. The judge dismissed my case and chastised me as the aggressor even when I had detailed documentation and he had none. My story experience is one of many. Myself and other landlords who are also minorities and immigrants, this is our business and this is our investment. We wanted to give back and to help. And for my opinion, from my experience, this is why there's a housing crisis, because landlords like me get the shitty end of the stick and are vilified by the judicial system. We are fed up. We hope there are changes to make it fair for both tenants and the landlords. So that's my piece of that I wanted to share. Thank you.
All right. Thanks for spending some time with us and letting us know your views on that. And one more call for Angel Tomeo Sam, if you're there. Angel, *3 if you are. Oh. Okay. Yeah, sure. We'll try. So, caller, we're not sure who you are exactly, but if you want to give me your name. Hello, caller. Are you there? All right. Okay. Well, that brings us to the end of our list of people who wanted to testify tonight. So I so appreciate everyone who took the time and shared their thoughts with us. Thank you, council members, so many of you for participating. And thank you for all the speakers and sharing and staff. And a special welcome to Mr. Alexander. And I want to also thank my staff who's been working on this, Hannah Lee Allers and Lisa Gardner who are here, John DeLay from TV5, staying late, thank you. And Rowena Pineda, thank you so much for being part of this conversation and, again, being a great perspective on what equity means in Spokane. If you're interested in particularly on 1590, we will be taking public testimony on that next Monday evening. Our meeting starts at 6 p.m. We have a lot of issues on our agenda, but that will certainly be one of the significant ones. So thanks everyone for paying attention, and please stay healthy, take care of your neighbor and even your neighbor's neighbor so that we can all get through this together. Have a great Thanksgiving. Take care. Good night.
Thanks for using WebEx. Visit our website at www.webex.org